My question is to the Minister of ACC. Is he satisfied with the 4-week hearing loss regulation consultation timeframe?
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, there was a legal requirement for a 28-day consultation period in the ACC Act, but this was repealed by the previous government in 2008, of which the member was a minister. The government then argued that 28 days or 4 weeks was too long and a lesser period should be allowed. The government has chosen not to take advantage of this law change. The proposals on how to apportion industrial and age-related hearing loss claim costs were released on 24 May, and given the quite narrow issues involved, I am quite satisfied that 4 weeks is sufficient time for organisations and individuals to have a fair say.
The Honourable David Parker.
Doesn't the Minister see that his consultation period, which the media is reporting as being inadequate, could lead to the same sort of shambles and injustices that his changes to counselling for sexual abuse victims have caused?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I'd remind the member opposite that in 2008 his government repealed the requirement for a 28-day period and argued in this very parliament that 28 days was excessive. We don't take that view. We are providing for a period of 4 weeks in which people can make proper considerations and submissions on these particular changes.
The Honourable David Parker.
Why does the Minister keep insisting that the current rules for workplace hearing loss cannot be afforded by employers when it's proven that ACC levies for New Zealand employers are already lower per $100 of earnings than in Australia, and so should not be used to justify cuts to worker entitlements?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, during the course of the last government, hearing costs grew hugely, such that we have a projected liability around hearing claim costs of $1.3 billion. I think it is fair to say to employers that they must meet the full cost of hearing loss that is work-induced. But I do not think it is fair to say that the costs for age-related hearing loss should fall on employers. I don't think that's a fair approach. That's why the apportionment approach is recommended in these regulations, and the only issue in the regulations is whether it be an individual percentage or whether it be in bands.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, given the cost pressures he has described that ACC is under over hearing loss claims, does the Minister have any examples of wastage in this area?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the costs for hearing claims have increased from about $20 million per year to nearly $80 million per year. An example of the sort of practical waste in this area is over hearing aid batteries, where these used to be sent out automatically and simply billed by audiologists to ACC. I have dozens of examples from constituents where they've had batteries built up for galore. The sensible government has changed the system, provided batteries on request, and that has reduced costs in that one area by more than 45%.
The Honourable David Parker.
Does the Minister accept what health professionals like the New Zealand Audiological Society is saying, and I quote, "Those less able to afford these co-payments, such as older people and those from lower socio-economic groups, would simply not be able to get hearing aids and would simply go without?"
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, no, I don't. In fact, the bulk of people receiving hearing aid support are for non-work induced, for age-related. They are able to support through Judith Collins and her ministry for Veterans Affairs. There are grants available from the Ministry of Health. They provide support. The key issue here of principle, of which I'm not surprised by Labor's approach, is that the cost of age-related hearing loss should somehow be dumped onto employers. And I don't think that is fair, and that is why we're making the change.
Catherine Delahunty.
To the Minister for ACC, has he sought advice from the Minister of Disability Issues as to whether his proposed changes breach New Zealand's commitment under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to promote assistive technologies and make them available at an affordable cost?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the key word there is affordable. I don't think an increase from about $20 million a year to $80 million a year is fair on those who pay the levies in ACC, and I note that members opposite have raised concern about the extent to which ACC levies have increased. It is this government's view that ACC has a very important responsibility to meet the costs of those persons who have work-induced hearing loss. For those where it is age-related, then that is properly dealt with by the other agencies such as health, such as social development, and for veterans through Veterans Affairs.
Point of order, Catherine Delahunty.
The question was whether he had sought advice from the Minister for Disability Issues on this matter.
Well, I think the member's question that went on, if it didn't just ask that, it went on for a range of other matters. I seem to remember relating to UN conventions, etc., and the Minister picked up on that latter part of the question and answered it, I believe. Question number, the Honourable David Parker, point of order.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table a copy of a letter from the Audiological Society to the Prime Minister, which made the comments I referred to earlier and called these cuts unfair and unscientific.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Question number 7, Colin King.